very good evening to you and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Are. Here are our top stories. The treacherous militant group, which goes by the name of the Islamic State, also known as IS, have been accused by the United Nations of mass atrocities and recruiting children as fighters. In a report, investigators say public executions are a common spectacle in areas run by IS, one of the groups fighting against Syria's government. The report also accuses the Damascus authorities of using chemical agents in 8 separate incidents this year. The conflict between government forces and several rebel groups began back in 2011, and some 200,000 people have died since then. The findings are the result of 6 months of interviews and evidence collected between January and July this year as part of an inquiry into human rights violations inside of Syria.
Among the most disturbing findings in this report are accounts of large training camps where children, mostly boys from the age of 14, are recruited and trained to fight in the ranks of ISIS along with adults. To what concern ISIS, the Commission, as you can read in the report, indicates that members of ISIS have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in Aleppo and al-Raqqa governorates, including acts of torture, murder, enforced disappearance, and forcible displacement.
In the conflict between the groups,
For more on this, I'm now being joined by the Voice of America's Jeff Selden, who is at the Pentagon. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us again on The World Today. Now, what new steps are being taken by the United States in its fight against the Islamic State militants?
President Barack Obama has authorized the U.S. now to fly intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions over Syria. This is something new. The U.S. has been flying these types of surveillance missions for quite some time in a very heavy way over Iraq, 60 to 70 flights a day, both manned and unmanned aircraft, drones, airplanes that can be used as fighters and bombers like F-A-18 Hornets, which are flying off the deck of the USS George H.W. Bush, which is right now in the Persian Gulf. But now these flights, instead of just peering across the border and looking into Syria and what the Islamic State is doing there, now there are some flights that are going over Syria and looking in a more detailed way at what IS is doing there. And that's important because while a lot of the action and a lot of the attention has been going to what the Islamic State has been doing in Iraq, the headquarters, the command and control for the group has been in Syria. And the U.S. is now starting to get some better intelligence, better assessments of how the Islamic State is operating. And there's a lot of speculation that this is just the first step in what eventually could be U.S. airstrikes against the Islamic State in Syria.
Now, Jeff, can you give us any details concerning the talks going on between the U.S. and its allies concerning IS?
There have been talks going on. The top U.S. ranking military officer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Martin Dempsey, recently was on a trip to Afghanistan, during which he talked about bringing some of the regional partners into play and getting them more involved, specifically naming Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Turkey. How that would be done, what role they would play, has not been defined. In the meantime, though, other nations are starting to help out. The U.S. announcing just yesterday that a group of 7 nations, including countries like Albania, Denmark, Great Britain, have now joined an effort to help arm Kurdish fighters, the Peshmerga, who've been battling the Islamic State in northern Iraq, getting them weapons that they need in order to conduct operations. The U.S. said this is very important because some of the weapons the Kurds are using, like AK-47s, not produced by the U.S., these other nations have them in the stockpile, and that's going to help them out. They're also providing some mortar rounds. So that's what they're focusing on right now. In terms of larger discussions, there are ongoing discussions because this is being seen as a regional threat right now with the potential to turn into a global threat. The NATO, the North American military alliance that involves the U.S., Great Britain, many other countries, has made some comments about possibly, if asked, looking at the situation. So there is a great deal of concern about what is going on and how countries can get involved in order to not just confront it militarily, but also with other means.
Now, Jeff, what's your take on the United Nations report, which says the IS is guilty of war crimes, including recruitment of child soldiers and also public executions.
Well, the report is really not all that surprising. Just earlier today, we had a briefing from a Pentagon spokesman who talked about how there's great suffering in the area, specifically talking about Iraq, but he also talked about the Islamic State, and he said, quote, they're brutal, they're savage. The degree to which this group will go in order to win by spreading fear and intimidating local populations, the videos that they release, it's no surprise about how the UN report talks about war crimes and crimes against humanity, and even the recruitment isn't of children as young as 10 shouldn't be a surprise, because one of the things that the Islamic State has done well, and that is causing a great amount of concern in Western nations, is the way that they've been able to attract foreign fighters, and it's something that they do well. They send out this imagery that is able to attract some foreign fighters, and they're able to indoctrinate them, and it appears that they're trying to apply some of those same methods and recruitment tactics to kids in the areas where they're conquering.
Finally, Jeff, do you have any information concerning the American who is believed to have been killed while fighting for the Islamic militants in Syria?
The officials here in the U.S. confirmed his death. His name is Douglas MacArthur McCain, a 33-year-old. He grew up in Minnesota, was living in California, in the U.S. state of California, before telling his family he was going